Today, we're going to create the most immersive RC experience in the world, and to do so, we need what's in this little box. This is the brand new 3-axis gimbal from Caddx, and this thing is amazing. It is really, really small, and it should allow us to put a camera inside an RC car that'll be able to move in all directions and put us in the driver's seat. To go along with that gimbal, we're obviously going to need a camera. And we've got this really awesome high-resolution, high-refresh rate camera to go along with it, as well as the transmitter we're gonna need and a bunch of wiring we're gonna have to figure out. And to take control of that camera, we've got these awesome goggles. Not only are these gonna give us a fantastic view of what we see in the camera, but these goggles are actually gonna allow us to turn our head and turn the camera to see what's going on as we're driving. As far as I know, one of these little gimbals has never been put in an RC basher before, but that's what we're gonna do today. Before we do that though, we need to put this thing together and make sure everything works. To start off with, we just need to take the camera, take the back off of it. Now, if you've never experienced this kind of technology before, this is what's known as FPV, or first-person view, and it was really made popular with quadcopters and drones, and it creates an incredible immersive experience unlike anything you've ever experienced before. And now we just install the camera into the gimbal. I'm definitely curious to see just how much abuse this gimbal is going to be able to take. I know the camera hardware is usually pretty good, as FPV can be pretty rough on things, but gimbals are generally fairly fragile, so it's going to be interesting to see just how long this thing lasts. Now that the camera's installed, it should give you a better idea of what this thing can do. See how the camera can move in all directions? That's going to be really interesting when we're looking through the windshield of an RC car. One thing that does give me hope here as far as durability is concerned is this is mounted on kind of a shock mount. We are going to have to create custom mounts for the RC cars because, again, this hasn't really been done before. This little part here is known as the VTX, or video transmitter. Its job is to take the signal from the camera, which we're going to plug in now, and then translate it and send it out through these antennas to the goggles. FPV has come a long way in the last few years. Previously, it was all what's known as analog, which means that basically it was like looking at an old broadcast TV. It was a lot of fun, but not super immersive. More recently, companies like Caddx with this Walksnail system have come up with high definition, high refresh rate systems that really increase what you can see and what you can do with these things. The other thing this VTX does is relay that head tracking data from the goggles to the gimbal. So we've got one more cable we need to hook up for that. There we go. And then we just got one more cable to provide power to the VTX. Now, before we install these, we need to test them on the bench just to make sure everything works. I've got a bench power supply above your head that we're going to be using, but you could just use a battery for this. This works in a pretty wide range of voltages. You can check the manual to see exactly what those voltages are. Okay, guys, first power up. Let's see what this thing can do. And there we go, guys. As you can see, this is already stabilizing. Let's get this hooked up to the goggles. These are the brand new Walksnail Goggles L. Let's get these plugged in and take a look inside. As you can see, we've got a great view of the back wall of the studio, and head tracking's working perfectly. And now that we know everything's working properly, let's get this thing in a car. Our first victim's gonna be this awesome FMS FCX10 Trail Basher. We're gonna need to mount the camera somewhere in this area. That's right above where the battery goes, so I think we can make a sled that goes on top of the battery, and then we can just mount the camera and gimbal on top of that. In order to do that, I designed this sled. I wanna make sure everything fits before we 3D print it though, so let's laser cut a pattern out and make sure everything's where we expect it to be. I'm gonna use this Algo Laser Alpha Mark II to laser cut this pattern out in paper. This thing makes it really easy to do rapid prototyping because you can just take your file, bring it directly to the laser cutter, cut out your part, and not have to use a computer in order to control it. Now, as opposed to taking 15 minutes to 3D print this, it took about 10 seconds to cut it out of paper. We can see that the sled is definitely long enough, and the hole spacing should be good enough. Now that we're sure it's gonna fit, let's go ahead and 3D print out the full part. And while we're waiting for that print to finish, I wanna go ahead and swap this back over to the stock power system. This Castle brushless power system's great. Unfortunately, I don't have enough channels on my transmitter to properly operate all the different options you have on this crawler, so I want to put the stock ESC receiver combo and transmitter back in there. The stock brushed system on this truck's actually really good, so it's not like this is going to be a huge downgrade, and it'll be nice to actually be able to use all the functions. Fortunately, power systems are pretty easy to swap out in this truck. FMS originally put the ESC here in the battery tray. I don't really like that because I don't like the battery slamming into it and crashes. So I'm actually gonna mount it down here. Let me get this mounted up, get this wiring done, and let's see how that 3D print turned out. And there we go, guys. This looks great. Let's get it mounted up and see what it looks like. Hopefully I got the height on this right. Before we mount everything else up, let's fire it up and find out. Position looks good. Head tracking's awesome, though it's really blurry. Hang on a second. I didn't realize how foggy these windows were. Fortunately, it looks like it's just stickers. Let's get these peeled off of here. All right, let's try that again. There we go, that's much better. I think I want to bring the camera up a little bit, but this looks like it's gonna be awesome. This VTX creates a lot of heat. In an aircraft, it gets plenty of air movement, but in this, we're gonna have to add a little fan. I'm gonna get this installed, fix up all this wiring, and I'll show you what I did. Okay guys, here's the setup. We've got the gimbal up front. We've got the VTX double side taped to the gimbal mount. We've got a fan here. That fan is running to the receiver. And then we've got a 2S balance plug that goes to the balance lead on the battery. Now, obviously, this is just a bit of a temporary setup. If we were gonna do this more permanently, we would definitely wanna have things a little bit better mounted, but I think this is gonna work just fine. Let's see how it does. All right, guys, let's see what this thing can do. This is absolutely awesome. This is probably the coolest RC experience I've ever had. Look at this. You can look down, see the wheels. You can see what's next to you. This is so cool. And the best part about it is, I'm doing this from the inside of my truck. This is really, really neat. Let's go explore some more. I kind of thought this was going to be a lot less stable, but I can see the truck bouncing around, but the camera's actually very steady. I wonder how far away from myself I can get. I'm a little bit concerned that I might roll this thing over and not be able to find it. So far, so good, though. This is so awesome. This definitely feels like some kind of future of RC. Can I see behind me? Oh, look at that. I can see all the way around behind me. Very, very cool. Yeah, this is really neat, guys. I really wasn't expecting it to be this much fun, but being able to blast through all of this and be right inside the truck feels so immersive. I'm really surprised about that. Of course, I really don't know where I am, but, you know, it doesn't really matter just because the world feels so much larger right now because I'm actually inside the truck. All right, I'm just gonna ride around. Check this out. You can see me in the truck. Let's see if we can drive under the truck. Is it gonna be low enough? Whoa, no, not quite. Maybe we can go sideways. No, I think she's just a little too tall. We can inspect the bottom of the truck though, that's pretty neat. Alright guys, this is awesome, but I really want to see what some serious bashing feels like. Let's check that out. And to do that, we're going to use this awesome low-C super laser nut. It's got a perfect place to put the camera here in the front, but first, we need to fix it. As you can see here in our last outing, we bent this hinge pin, and this arm's also trashed. I think the super laser nut's going to be perfect for this job. It's definitely not the world's most hardcore basher, but it should keep the camera nice and protected and be a lot of fun. You can clearly see here why we're replacing this arm. We also need to straighten out this hinge pin. I don't have a replacement for it, but these are usually pretty easy to bend back into shape. I'm just gonna stick it in the vise and use this pipe to bend it back. If you don't have this, you could use a block of wood and a hammer, or just a hammer and some concrete. And there we go, guys. That's not perfect, but this is a basher, not a racer. It fits in the arm and moves smoothly, so this will be just fine. And now we just need to put this back together again. And there we go, guys. Let's get that camera installed. First thing I want to do is pop this roof off to get a better look inside. I know I gave the super laser nut some flack when it first came out, and whereas I don't think it makes a good hardcore basher, it's definitely a cool scale buggy, and I think it's going to be awesome for this application. All right, I got some measurements. Let me whip up a quick mount. On the top, we've got the mount for the camera, and on the bottom, we've got the mount for the truck. Let's see how it fits. That looks like that's going to be just about perfect. And I was able to use the laser cutter to make a template for drilling the holes. I will just put this on the underside, and since this is made from the exact same model as the part, I know these holes will be perfect. And we'll just punch these out to about M3. I think the thing that I'm most impressed with on this gimbal isn't necessarily the head tracking. Head tracking's really, really cool, but it's the stabilization that you get with this as a bonus feature. I've done surface FPV before and it's fun, but you usually get bounced around really badly. This stabilizes that video and makes it a lot more enjoyable. Of course, trail riding or crawler is kind of easy mode for this, so I'm really curious to see how this is going to handle a real bash. And if it survives that, we're probably going to torture test this thing to failure to see what it can really handle. I have my doubts that this thing's going to handle big air, but the Super Laser Nut also might not handle big air, and I'm definitely curious to see which one fails first. Moment of truth, did we make the adapter the right height? I don't know, guys, I'd say that looks just about perfect. Let's get this installed. Sorry I couldn't show you me screwing this in, but it took 3 hands and my head, but this thing's very solid. Now I just need to tape down the VTX, install a battery, and we can test this thing out. Okay, there we go, guys, she's all set. Let's see what it looks like. That's not too bad. The bars are kind of in the way. I might have made a tactical error by putting the camera in the center and not on the left or right, but let's go see how it is bashing. All right, guys, let's see how she does. Okay, so yeah, the bars are definitely in the way. If you were gonna have a permanent installation, obviously you'd either get rid of these bars. I thought about cutting them out of the way. Unfortunately, it would cost me about 60 bucks to replace them, so I decided to just go ahead and leave them in there, but they're really not that distracting when you're driving, and this is absolutely awesome, guys. This is where this thing really shines. The crawler was fun, and I'm sure if you're really into crawling, it could be a really good time, but this is really getting my heart pumping, man. This is absolutely awesome. The stabilization feels really, really good. It feels like you're actually inside the car, and this is just amazing. Let's see how it feels on concrete. Do a little donut. Woohoo! Yeah, guys, this feels absolutely awesome. Hello! This is pretty amazing. Cruising around is an absolute blast, but let's see what this thing can really handle. There are very few things in this hobby that really get my juices flowing, and this thing did it. It is absolutely amazing to drive first person, especially stabilized. I do want to mention that the video looks a lot shakier than it feels when you're actually driving. That's very similar to flying FPV. Your brain kind of smooths things out. Now, speaking of smooth, these bearings in this gimbal are still buttery smooth, and this thing ate a lot of dirt. I'm very impressed. This also tanked a bunch of heavy upside down landings, some fairly sizable crashes, and a lot of other things that I don't think this thing was ever designed for. Overall, this is an awesome upgrade for your car, and it definitely gives you an experience you can't get anywhere else. Now that is going to come at a price. This Caddx GM3 gimbal is not that cheap, and you do have to get a compatible VTX. The new goggles L I've been using are fairly inexpensive, but overall this is definitely not going to be a cheap upgrade. And keep in mind that this really isn't designed for hardcore bashing. It survived what I did to it, and I think it would be just fine with regular driving around. But if you smash this thing up, it probably will end up breaking eventually. Now, speaking of smashing things up, I'm going to go stick this in another car and go have some more fun. Why don't you meet me on one of these videos?